The rain had been pouring relentlessly, its steady rhythm against the windows almost soothing in its persistence. But in the small town of Ashbrook, the storm had never been more fitting. It was February, a few days before Valentine's Day, and in the midst of all the love and celebration, something sinister was lurking just beneath the surface. A single red rose sat on the counter of the old-fashioned flower shop on Main Street. It was the only one left, a dark, velvety bloom that seemed to absorb the light around it. It wasn't a special flower, not in the sense that it came from an exotic garden or held any particularly rare qualities. But there was something about it, something that made it stand out, a whisper in the back of the mind, a chill that ran down the spine. And it wasn't the first time it had been noticed. People had been talking about it for days, ever since the first customer had walked into the shop and asked about it. There had been something unsettling about the flower, something hidden just beneath its petals. The shop owner, Martha Green, had always been superstitious, her old eyes narrowing whenever she spoke of the rose. It was a family heirloom, she said, handed down from generations. A rare breed of rose that had always bloomed in her family's garden. But nobody in town knew the whole story. Nobody knew what the flower truly represented. It wasn't until Sarah Fletcher, a young woman who had recently moved back to Ashbrook, walked into the shop that the curse of the Valentine's Day rose would come to light. Sarah wasn't familiar with the town's history. She hadn't grown up here, and she had only come back because of her job in the city that had taken her away for years. She had moved back to Ashbrook to start fresh, to leave behind the shadows of the past and focus on building a future. And for the most part she had succeeded. Until now. Her phone buzzed in her pocket as she walked into the flower shop, the familiar scent of roses filling the air. She pulled it out, expecting a message from her mother or maybe a friend, but instead, it was a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Valentine's Day is the perfect time to remind you of what's yours," the message read. "I hope you like the gift." Confused, Sarah stared at the screen. She hadn't received a gift. She hadn't ordered anything. There was no name, no return number. Just the cryptic message. Her heart began to race. It was strange. Why would someone send her a gift without her knowledge? And why did it feel so wrong? She pushed the thought aside as she entered the shop, the bell above the door chiming softly. Martha Green looked up from behind the counter, her wrinkled face breaking into a tight smile. Her hands were trembling slightly as she arranged the flowers in front of her. "Hello dear," Martha said, her voice high-pitched. "What can I get for you today?" Sarah hesitated. She hadn't planned on buying flowers, but something about the shop, something about the air around Martha made her feel uneasy. I was just looking," Sarah replied, her eyes scanning the shelves of flowers. "Actually, I received a strange message about a gift, and I was wondering if—" "Oh no," Martha interrupted, her eyes widening slightly. "A gift, for you?" Sarah nodded. "Yeah, it's from someone I don't know and it seems strange. I didn't ask for anything." Martha set down the bouquet in her hands and took a step towards Sarah. Her expression shifted from one of kindness to something more guarded, more calculating. She glanced toward the back of the shop, where the single red rose sat on the counter, hidden in the shadows. "Don't touch it," Martha whispered, her voice low, almost as though she were warning Sarah of a danger she couldn't quite explain. "That flower? It's not just any flower." Sarah frowned, confused by the sudden change in Martha's demeanor. "What do you mean?" Martha glanced over her shoulder again as though checking for someone else in the room. The shop was empty save for the two of them. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "You've heard the stories, haven't you?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "About the rose. It's been in my family for generations. And every time someone receives it, something bad happens." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. "What do you mean something bad happens?" Martha hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. She wiped them on her apron, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "It's cursed, dear. The rose was never meant to be given. It's bound by something older than us. And if someone takes it, they're bound to the curse. It's always the same. They receive it with the best of intentions, but something dark follows." Sarah's mind raced as she tried to piece together what Martha was saying. The phone call, the mysterious message, it was all connected, wasn't it? But how? How could a simple rose be the cause of all this? "Who sends it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Martha's eyes flickered to the flower on the counter once again, and for a moment she seemed lost in thought. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Whoever receives the rose becomes a target," she said softly. "And the curse doesn't let go. It'll follow you. It'll never stop." Sarah felt a chill race down her spine. The pieces were falling into place, but she wasn't sure she liked the picture they were creating. Who could send her a cursed gift like this? And why now, after all these years? Just then the doorbell above the shop's entrance rang again, and a young man walked in, his coat drenched from the rain. He was tall, dark-haired, and handsome, someone Sarah would have noticed had she been paying attention. But her mind was consumed with the curse, with the chilling words Martha had spoken. "Is this the last one?" the man asked, his voice calm but urgent. "The Valentine's Day rose?" Martha nodded, her eyes never leaving the man's face. "Yes, but I wouldn't." He waved her off, taking the rose without hesitation. He handed over a few bills and turned to leave, barely sparing Sarah a glance. As the door closed behind him, Sarah felt the air in the shop grow colder. Her breath caught in her throat, and her thoughts began to spiral. Something wasn't right. The rose, the message, it was all part of something far darker. She had to figure out what was going on before it was too late. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye, a faint reflection in the glass window of the shop, a shadow moving behind her. And then, in the distance, she heard it. A whisper, soft but clear. "You took the gift. Now you must pay the price." The storm outside had only grown worse. The rain pelted the windows in a relentless barrage, and the wind howled through the trees. But inside Martha's flower shop, the atmosphere was thick with an unnatural stillness. Sarah stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the door where the mysterious man had just disappeared into the night with the cursed Valentine's Day rose. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to unfold. The whispers in her mind only grew louder, warning her of the inevitable consequences of accepting something so innocent, so beautiful, but so dangerous. She needed to know more, needed to understand how something as simple as a flower could carry so much power. The bell above the shop door jingled softly again, but it wasn't the sound of someone entering, it was the wind pushing against the door, creaking as though urging Sarah to leave. Martha, who had been quietly staring at the counter, finally broke the silence. "Leave, child," she whispered, her voice thick with dread. "Before it's too late." Sarah glanced over at her. The elderly woman was trembling, her hands clutching the edges of the counter like a lifeline. Her eyes flickered to the window, her face paling as though something terrible was approaching. What do you mean?" Sarah stammered. "What's going to happen?" Martha's gaze drifted back to the door, and her voice cracked as she spoke. "It's not just a curse. It's the beginning of something you can't stop once it's started." Sarah stepped back, her heart racing. "What do you mean? I don't understand. What's happening to me?" The old woman finally raised her eyes to meet Sarah's, and for the first time, Sarah saw the fear that had been hidden in her eyes. When someone takes the rose, they become marked by it. The curse doesn't just follow, it feeds. And it grows stronger the longer you keep it. The more you try to ignore it, the more you're drawn into its grasp. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. But, it's just a flower. Just a gift. How can something so small have so much power? Martha sighed, her face falling into deep sorrow. "The curse has been in my family for generations. It began with my great-great-grandmother, a woman who was betrayed by someone she loved. That betrayal led to her death, and when she died, the curse she had left behind became a gift for the living." "A gift?" Sarah repeated, her mind reeling. "You mean this has happened before?" Martha nodded, her eyes hardening with the weight of her words. "Many times. Every year around Valentine's Day, the cursed rose finds its way to someone who doesn't know the danger. And with each new recipient, the curse grows stronger. But who is sending them?" Sarah asked, her voice low. "And why me?" Martha didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood silently, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of the counter. "I don't know," she whispered. "But I know it's only a matter of time before you're forced to confront what you've taken. The man who just left? He's part of it. He always is. And he's not the first." Suddenly, a thought struck Sarah, one so chilling it made her breath catch in her throat. "The man he took the rose. Was he cursed too?" Martha nodded gravely. "Yes. But that's not the worst part. You see, the rose doesn't just mark you. It leads you to others who are already part of the curse. They find you. They always find you." The words lingered in the air between them, suffocating Sarah, drowning her in the weight of their meaning. The bell above the door rang again, sharp and sudden. A chill ran through the shop. This time someone had entered. Sarah turned quickly, her pulse quickening. It was the same man who had left moments before, his dark figure standing in the doorway. He had returned. But something was different now. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. His clothes were drenched in rain, his hair slicked back, but it wasn't the rain that had caused the horror in his eyes. It was something else. You need to stop it, the man rasped, his voice cracking. You need to stop the curse before it's too late. Sarah stepped back, her breath shallow. What's happening? What do you know about this curse? The man took a step toward her, his hands trembling. I'm the one who sent it, he said, his voice full of regret. I'm the one who gave you the gift. The words hit Sarah like a slap. She took another step back, shaking her head in disbelief. What? No, you. The man nodded grimly. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. You were supposed to be the one to break it. The only one who could. Break it? Sarah asked, her mind racing. But I don't understand. What's happening to me? Martha's voice cut through the confusion, her words laced with despair. He's telling you the truth. But it's too late now. The rose has marked you. You can't escape it. No one can. You have to face what comes next. The man stepped closer, his face contorted in agony. I'm sorry. I was desperate. I thought you'd be the one to fix it, to end the curse. But now it's too late. Sarah turned, her mind spiraling, her thoughts a blur of questions, fear, and confusion. What do I have to do? Please just tell me. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, faded envelope. He placed it on the counter in front of her, his hand shaking. Inside is the answer. The key to stopping it. But beware. Once you know, you can't unknow it. And if you try to stop it, it will come after you. With that, he turned and fled the shop, his footsteps heavy on the wet pavement outside. Sarah stared at the envelope, her heart pounding in her chest. Take it, child, Martha said softly, her voice full of sorrow. Take the envelope and decide. You may find the answers you seek, but they will come at a cost. With trembling hands, Sarah reached for the envelope, breaking the seal. Inside was a single, folded piece of paper. She opened it, her breath catching in her throat as she read the words. The rose must be returned to where it came from. Only then will the curse be broken. But be warned, the return will not go unchallenged. Her eyes widened, fear creeping into her veins. I have to go back, to where it all began. But as she looked up from the paper, she realized something chilling. Martha's face had gone pale, and her eyes were wide with terror. Not that, she whispered, her voice trembling. You don't know what you're about to unleash. The shop door slammed shut behind her, and Sarah's world was plunged into darkness. The curse had already begun, and there was no turning back.